In a landscape like this, it's easy to believe you're free of danger. But looks can be deceiving. When danger appears, it pays to be prepared. That's true whether your job takes you to the depths of the ocean or high above a factory floor. When working from a height, aerial lifts are generally safer to use than ladders. They provide an easy means to reach work sites far above the ground while supplying a level platform to stand on. But unfortunately, aerial lifts are not accident-proof. According to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics, in the construction industry alone, 26 workers die each year from using aerial lifts. Most serious and fatal accidents occur due to electrocutions, falls, collisions, and tip-overs. The best way to eliminate these risks is to be aware of them and follow safe work practices every time you use an aerial lift. In this program, we'll discuss the equipment, pre-start inspections, and safe use. Before a worker is authorized to use a lift, they must receive training from a qualified person. Because aerial lift designs are varied and ever-changing, this training covers the operation, safety features, and limitations of the specific model the worker will be using. The primary reference for the safe operation of a lift is the operating manual supplied by the manufacturer. This manual should stay with the lift at all times, and any worker who uses that lift must have a thorough understanding of the manual's contents. In addition to this, your employer may have other safety guidelines that take into account the work environment, the nature of the tasks, and company policy. Despite these numerous variables in equipment and work situations, however, there are some safety principles common to all aerial lifts. Before climbing onto a lift, several factors must be taken into consideration to ensure safe operation. Every aerial lift requires the use of fall protection. The type you will need depends on the lift you are using. For scissor lifts, a guardrail is considered adequate fall protection, as long as the worker stays within the boundaries of the guardrail. When using most other types of aerial lift, such as bucket trucks and boom lifts, a personal fall restraint system is required. This consists of a body belt or harness and a 2-foot lanyard. The lanyard secures the worker to an anchorage point on the bucket. Never attach the lanyard to a pole, beam, or any other structure outside the lift. The length of the lanyard is important. Fall restraint systems have a short lanyard without any sort of tearaway shock absorber. This short tether is intended to prevent a fall from occurring by keeping the person inside the bucket. All aerial lifts have a load capacity rating that indicates the amount of weight the lift can safely carry. Before work begins, you must know the rating of the boom and basket you will be using, and make sure that the combined weight of all personnel, tools, equipment, and materials carried on the lift does not exceed this rating. Aerial lifts are also rated for the grade they can safely operate on. In other words, some lifts can only be used on surfaces that are level, while others are designed to be used on surfaces that are somewhat sloping. Never operate a lift on a grade that exceeds the manufacturer's rating. This destabilizes the machine, often resulting in a tip-over. If the lift has outriggers, use them as required by the manufacturer. Make sure the outrigger floats are placed on a surface that has enough strength to support them. To disperse the pressure over a larger surface area, blocks can be used underneath the floats. Except for high-voltage work, government regulations do not specify how many workers the operation of an aerial lift requires. A good safety practice, however, is to have a person stationed on the ground who is able to give aid in the event of an emergency. Aerial lifts have 2 sets of controls. The upper controls are attached to the bucket and within easy reach of the person who is riding in the lift. The lower controls are positioned at ground level. These controls are designed to override the upper controls in case of a malfunction or other safety hazard, but they must never be operated without the permission of the worker in the basket. The exception to this is if the worker becomes incapacitated by injury or illness. The operator of the lift is responsible for inspecting the equipment before each day's use. This pre-start inspection includes both a visual assessment and an operational check of the entire unit. The manual provided by the manufacturer gives detailed information on how to inspect the lift you will be using. In general, check that there are no loose or missing parts on the unit, and make sure the welds on the boom are free of cracks. Check that all warning signs and decals on the lift are readable. These display such critical information as the lift's workload capacity, the maximum platform height, and maximum operating pressure of the hydraulic system. Inspect for leaks in the air, hydraulic fluid, and fuel systems, and make sure hydraulic hoses are free of kinks and pinch points. Be sure that tires are at the correct air pressure, and look for punctures, cracks, and tread wear. Check fiberglass and other insulating components for damage or wear. Inspect that safety devices are sound, such as guardrails, outriggers, and stabilizers. If you will be using personal fall protection, check harnesses, belts, and lanyards according to the manufacturer's directions. Finally, test the lift's operating and emergency controls. With the basket unmanned, use the lower controls to extend the boom and look for signs of damage or malfunction. During this pre-start inspection, if a problem is discovered that affects the safe operation of the lift, tag out the machine and report this to your supervisor. The lift must be taken out of service until it has been repaired by a person authorized to perform maintenance. Besides this daily inspection, more detailed inspections must be performed regularly by a qualified person. If the aerial lift you will be using is a rental unit, the dealer should be able to provide records of the lift's inspection and maintenance history. This is important because a unit that is well maintained is far safer on the job. You don't want to discover when you are high up in the air that the equipment you've rented has not been serviced properly. Hazards in the environment are every bit as dangerous as faulty equipment, so it is also important to inspect the area where you will be working. To provide a safe base, the surface that the lift will sit on must be able to adequately support the combined weight of the equipment, the workers, and any other tools or materials. Avoid tip-overs by carefully surveying the ground for holes, debris, ditches, and soft spots in the earth due to mud or untamped earth fills. During this inspection, check overhead for possible obstructions. When working outside, tree branches can cause injury or tangle the lift, but the most serious danger is power lines. Many people assume the black coating on overhead power lines is an insulator that provides protection against electric shock, but this isn't true. The coating's only function is to protect the lines from harsh weather. Touching the line is no different than touching a bare wire. For this reason, government regulations mandate that workers remain at least 10 feet away from power lines that are 50,000 volts or less. When voltage is higher than this, the rule is 10 feet plus an additional 4 inches for every 10,000 volts over 50,000. When working near power lines, continually check your position to make certain you maintain a safe distance, and be aware that trees and overcast days can make spotting power lines and judging distances that much more difficult. Also, remember that trees themselves can become excellent conductors of electricity if their limbs come in contact with a power line. When checking an area for hazards, it is important to consider traffic flow. Being struck by a second vehicle is a major risk factor that can cause the lift to tip over or throw the operator from the bucket. As much as possible, avoid setting up where other vehicles or construction equipment could cross your path. When you must work near other traffic, secure your work zone with traffic control barrels or other clearly visible barricades. Prior to using a lift, warn people in the area and use barricades such as cones or caution tape to keep pedestrians at a safe distance. Before mounting or dismounting from a lift, make sure that the platform is in the lowered position. Any climbing should be done using the 3 points of contact method. Both hands and 1 foot or both feet and 1 hand should be in contact with the equipment at all times. Once inside the lift, remember to secure the entry door before raising the equipment. When operating the controls, use a slow, easy touch so that the platform's movement is smooth rather than jerky. While extending the lift, always make sure that you stay within the vertical and horizontal reach limits established by the manufacturer. If at any time the equipment appears to be malfunctioning, stop work immediately and report the problem to your supervisor. Do not use the equipment again until the problem has been checked out and repaired by a qualified person. While working from an aerial lift, keep your feet firmly on the floor. Do not climb or sit on the edge of the basket, platform, or guardrail, and do not use ladders, planks, scaffolds, boxes, or any other such device to increase your working height. Avoid using the lift in ways that increase the risk of tipping over. For example, do not subject the lift to a side load by using the boom to push the lift along the ground. Unless the manufacturer has approved this procedure, do not use the lift as a crane. That is, do not attempt to lift loads by having them slung below the basket. Another risky behavior is to attach ropes, cables, or similar lines to the platform, as these could possibly tangle or catch on something when the equipment moves. And, when exposure to wind is possible, avoid increasing the surface area of the platform or load, as this can act as a sail, resulting in less stability. Another potentially dangerous procedure is moving a lift while the worker is elevated in the basket. This is only allowed if the lift is designed for that purpose and if your facility does not prohibit this type of operation. If it is an authorized procedure, know the manufacturer's exact guidelines before proceeding. The route to be traveled must be surveyed immediately before the move, with a check for traffic, holes or uneven surfaces, and obstructions overhead. While the lift is in motion, keep your focus on the direction you are traveling and maintain a safe distance from potential hazards. Keep the speed within the limits set by the manufacturer, usually 3 miles per hour or less. This slower speed reduces the possibility of bouncing the platform and of momentum carrying the vehicle farther than intended. Once a task is completed, check that the area is clear of workers and obstructions before lowering the platform. If you need to add fuel to a lift, shut off the engine first. When fueling engines or charging batteries, choose a well-ventilated area away from flames, sparks, fumes, or other fire and explosion hazards. Before leaving an aerial lift unattended, remove the key. This prevents an unauthorized person from attempting to use the lift and putting themselves and others at risk. Aerial lifts provide a solid, comfortable base to stand on when working above ground level, but a clear understanding of potential hazards is essential. Whenever you use an aerial lift, follow these guidelines. Operate the equipment within the manufacturer's specifications. Use the appropriate fall protection. Inspect the lift prior to use. Check the worksite for potential hazards. Avoid activities that could destabilize the machine and cause a tip-over. And finally, only travel in or transfer off of an elevated lift if authorized by the manufacturer and your employer. If you have any questions about the proper use of aerial lifts at your facility, ask your supervisor. Whether your job takes you under the sea or high off the ground, the environment you work in determines many of the hazards you'll face while on the job. But with a strong commitment to safety and a thorough knowledge of the equipment you will be using, you can prevent accidents and injuries from occurring.